name is Nicholas Ngige.
My name is Sebastian.
I am Panavi. I'm Grace Maringanga. I'm Ruth.
Diane Stevenson.
Jen McGaddy.
Samir Kadewa.
Christina Vivid.
Safi Uizeye.
Jaja Uizeye.
Agatha Kinethia.
Faiza.
Dr. John Mwangi.
My name is DeAndrea Weeks, and I am with Virginia for Africa.
I am with Nintendo for Africa.
I am with Vitendo for Africa. And I am with
Vitendo for Africa.
I am with
I'm with
I am with
I am with Vitendo for Africa. I'm going to go ahead and do the introduction for our guest today. The Betsy Cohen is the Executive Director of St. Louis Mosaic Project, a program of the World Trade Center, St. Louis, within the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. The organization's goals is to attract and retain international people to St. Louis for their skills and culture. Betsy has worked with hundreds of international students, relocating immigrants, international executives, and foreign-born work-authorized job seekers. Betsy is the author of the new book launched last month. It's called Welcome to USA, You Are Hired, a guide for foreign-born job seekers. Betsy is known thought leader who works on emerging issues. She brings people together for change, creating shared value and making business issues combined with positive community change her strength. She holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BA in economics from Wellesley College. We are so lucky to have you, Betsy, today. And I know you have a lot to share. I've heard you speak in different forums, but I think for this one, I will let you share a little bit. We're going to be able to focus on a little bit on the book, and then I'll jump into some few questions that I've prepared for you.
Well, certainly with my work with the Mosaic Project, I've had the pleasure of getting to know so many of our foreign-born in the region, and I see someone here who works with CASEL, with immigrant inclusion, with Victoria, through the Immigrant Service Provider Network, the International Institute's Workforce Group, many community partners. And it was really kind of, I had a awakening in the spring this year. What happened for me was being home, the pandemic, because the Mosaic Project that works to attract and retain foreign-born people in the area, we weren't doing as many activities and events. And I was doing more coaching one-on-one for people about their jobs and their careers. And I was spending more time doing that work. And I kept saying to myself, as a lot of us, I think, during the pandemic, like, what is my purpose in life? And why do I do the work I do? And how do I keep being positive when the pandemic is difficult? And one thought was to do more coaching. But a number of people had said to me, Betsy, you post on LinkedIn a lot of tips about jobs and finding jobs, and you should write a book. You should write a book. And so I heard that from a number of people, even though I never thought that I would write a book. And so I kind of said to myself in March, I think maybe it's time. Maybe the time is right to do this, because I had two things that were in my head. One was we had gone through January 6th and the insurrection and the president, and I felt in March like we did have a new president, President Biden, and an administration that was going to be open about increasing immigration, refugees, international students. So all of a sudden I was feeling positive and upbeat about our ability as a country and as a region to be welcoming again. So I was feeling positive. And I had just gotten my first and second vaccine. And I could see that we were all going to start to get vaccines and that business would start to open up. And I felt very strongly that with my business background, that by the fall, we would have very low unemployment and employers would be desperate for workers, and foreign-born people would have a great chance all of a sudden to really get better jobs, and that if I could help them get a better job faster, I should put all my thoughts in a book. And so that was really what motivated me. And I started writing in April, and so many case studies of everybody, and some of you on this call, people that I know, and all of a sudden, all the people's stories, I just started writing down this story, this story, this story, this story. And I had all these case studies of what happened to all the people that were the real case studies. But I thought to myself, what am I learning from them? And I'm going to, I can put them in the book, but I have to like group them according to what happened. And how can I then share the lesson of why something worked and why something didn't, and what did we advise to do? And I also asked the World Trade Center and the Economic Partnership, I told them I was going to write the book on my own time. I was going to spend my own money. Were they fine with that? So that it would be my own, it's my own project. It's not the project. It's not funded or sponsored by the World Trade Center or the partnership. And they said, great. If you're going to go write a book, go write a book. So I started writing. I started talking to people. I actually worked with a book coach, and she encouraged me to organize it in a different way and be more thoughtful about helping people say, what are the stresses you go through? What do you do before you start to interview for a job? What about the interview process? What about can you negotiate a job? And then what about how do you succeed when you get into the job? So she kind of helped me organize it in a more thoughtful way about how the process works. And another thing she encouraged me was to get expert contributors. I think originally it would have been 100 pages of Betsy's advice, and that would have been good. But she encouraged me, and I have 12 different expert contributors nationwide and locally. I think we have Catherine, maybe you need to mute. That would be great. And so by encouraging me to ask other people nationwide who work with students and who work with professionals and who work with refugees to add to the book, it made the book that much more valuable. And so the book is 228 pages, and that includes testimonials, and it includes acknowledgments in the back with people like Shagun and Jeffrey. It includes other things, resources in the back by chapter with things you can go find some of the references that I talk about. But the fact that I had these other experts, I think, made it much more valuable. So I started writing, and then I started revising. I started figuring out how to make it more bite-sized, so that when you get the book, you'll see that there's a lot of white space. There's places to write your own thoughts and ideas. There's spacing between the paragraphs, because some of this is really kind of heavy information. Even though I tell these short stories that are somewhat charming, sometimes it's going to be hard when you hear that some of the stresses that happen when you go through the job, or what happens when you don't hear from the recruiters or the hiring person, or what happens, if you're not doing a good job of telling your references, that you put them down as a reference. And I give examples where people did something well or where they did something not so well, and how you can learn from that so that you can do it better. Another thing I would say is that part of the book is more toward a beginner, intermediate job searcher. And then in the back, there are special segments, and one of them is for the more executive job search, for higher level people with higher level of networking skills, and how do those operate. I also have an area in the back about companies and how do you advance. Once you got the job, how do you advance in an American company? What are some of the things that are going to make you succeed? Because sometimes immigrants have a view that if they do hard work and they're the best of everybody in their group, they'll be promoted, and then they're surprised because they're not. And somebody who's not as good gets promoted, and you're like, how does that happen? So I talk about that, and I talk about some of the unfortunate behaviors, things like likability, the aspect that how you have to form relationships and friendships. So, if Jeffrey and I are working together, how can he form a relationship with me so that we have a friendship and a rapport that's more than just the work? So I give recommendations on the 5 topics that you should use to bond with someone. So I give some very specific advice from my experience in corporate America, mentoring many people. So those are some of the examples that I would say about how I structured it, why I did it. And then the case studies were fun. I mixed and matched them. So it might be the right country, but a different name. I might have used a different name with a different country. One of the women who is Chinese, and she's an architect. When she read the book, she called me and she said, "Oh, I see that I'm Hamadre from India now." And I said, "Yes, you are now Hamadre from India." So, I was able to take the stories and twist them so that I could help, you as a reader say, oh, this was what my journey might be like. And that the case studies would make it more interesting and make it more real. Because you'll learn from what the other people's case studies would say.
I like the fact that you're able to put it all that. I think from the way I look at it is that this is information you had it for over years. When you're doing and talking to people, you had compiled the information, and that brings back to the story about how the V4A was also founded, because I had talked to people and we were putting all this information, and I was like, I think this information is so helpful if it can help somebody else if I just share it out, other than just keeping out with me and waiting for people to come and ask for me. But if they don't know me, that means they don't get that information. And it looks like for you, when you, after working with all people that you've been working with, you had a great resource of information, and you thought the same thing. If I can really be able to put it in a book, it can be able to reach out to people that you are not able to come into contact with on a daily basis.
And that's, to your point, that's really the purpose that I had in my mind, because I don't have a business. I have my job at the World Trade Center, but I felt like my purpose in life was to really share this knowledge so that others would have it and could learn from it and get a better job. And I think that that's also what's motivated people to post pictures of themselves with the book and share it with their friends and their networks, because they know that that was why I invested my time and money to do this, was to make it available and to make this knowledge. And I really believe in the power of our foreign-born talent to, get better jobs, and if they knew some of these things. And, sometimes being an ally, I can say things, share things from the majority culture that a minority culture won't know. And I knew that for myself as a woman in corporate America. I learned, and then I mentored women, people of color, international people. So I learned it for myself, and then I was able to share that with others. And that's what drove me here. And I think that that's also what some of the messages are that you all need to take away and share. And I think that things that the African Chamber does and things that Vitendo for Africa does elevates the skills and the networking that are so important for people. And I think when you see Shagun and Jeff going out, meeting people, being involved in the broader community, that's a very big part of what I talk about in the book, which is that role of relationships, how that fits into the hidden job market, how that fits into knowing someone in a company who can then put your resume forward or put in a good word for you. And how do you do that? You say, oh, I don't know people. I only know people in my community. And so I give very specific information in the book about where can you go? How do you do it? How do you make those relationships? How do you use LinkedIn? How do you invite people on LinkedIn? How do you make relationships, whether it's on the soccer field or at a child's soccer game or at a parent-teacher organization or with a neighbor? So it's a very important part of the job search process. And actually, I see Giselle Marcus is on, and Giselle gives some excellent talks about the role of networking. And it's one piece of the job search market. But, understanding, and when I write in this book about how foreign-born people need to do that, because sometimes foreign-born people stay with their own ethnic group because it's comfortable. But if you do that, you won't learn about the hidden job market. You won't learn about what I know, and you won't learn about other jobs that I hear of that I could put you forward for. So that's something that's really important.
No, I like that because I see on your book, because you just mentioned something I was just reading last night. On page 47, you say that in the case study, we see how candidate benefited from a personal introduction or a warm introduction to a person with new company opportunities. And I want to pick back on that because I have reached out to offices, knocked people, send emails, and I don't get the feedback. But when I reach out to Betsy and I say, I see so-and-so, do you mind making that introduction? And we've seen some magical happens when you
Fast,
yeah.
when somebody knows you, and then I write somebody and say, you really need to meet Jeffrey.
Mm-hmm.
It happens.
Yes.
And again, if Jeffrey knows somebody and I don't, and if he made the ask and said, somebody, would you meet Betsy? They would say the same thing. So, but you have to be willing. And one of the things I say in the book is that, half the time people will respond and be helpful. Half the time they won't. So, I try to prepare you to say, that's okay. Just go on. And sometimes people will be helpful and sometimes they won't.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. But if they do half the time, you're way better off.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's the reason why I really find that point is very important, especially to our community. I think networking, it's not something we really put much effort in it, because we think networking is when I meet my fellow Kenyan, or I feel my fellow, somebody that we speak the same language. But it is, or maybe thinking that I can only reach out to somebody for something I need now, as opposed to think I may not need Betsy now, but I know I can do something maybe. And if you've touched that on the book, something you mentioned on the book, I saw that from somebody. I can connect you with you today, but not knowing that 1 year, 2 years from now, there is something that through that connections, you may be able to play a role on something that I need.
Yes, I think that is true. And it goes both ways. And I think sometimes, the immigrants feel like, well, what do they offer? Why would they take that risk? But you have a lot to offer, particularly in the time right now where with diversity, equity, inclusion, and a need for employees, there's an interest in meeting more people that are different, in meeting people that bring diversity, wanting to see what their talent and skills are. So I do think right now is an open window, more than we might have seen 5 or 10 years ago. And so that's a moment in time that I really do want our foreign-born people to, our African community to know that people do want to know you, and they want to know who you are, and they're going to be interested to know you. But you also have to meet them halfway, or a little bit more than halfway. And many people will want to make that connection.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's something else that you mentioned also in the book. I think it's on page 43. It relates to that part of networking, because you mentioned about by volunteering for an organization that align with your interests, not only can you learn new things, you can also gain connections that are priceless. I can attest to that, because I think when I was starting the organization, I actually remember volunteered at Christian Hospital for 6 months. And through the time that I was there, the connection that I made, I still find myself using some connections that I made almost 10 years ago when I was volunteering. And I think that speaks volume, because a lot of people think, how much am I going to be paid? What do I get? I mean, as opposed to the time that you put in there, the value of the connections. People don't attach the price to the value that you connect when you're volunteering. Yeah. So
yes, and if you're volunteering, you form those relationships, but it also can build, skills. And then down the road, if you look for a job and you go, oh, that person knows someone, or they're married to this person, or I didn't know they worked at Centene. And then all of a sudden you have a chance to reconnect. And that's, interesting and valuable, to your point about not feeling as comfortable about networking. And I talk about it as making relationships. And one of my rules of thumb is that if you go to people hate going to events where they don't know people and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I mean, Jeffrey, Shagun, you guys are very good at it. Particularly Shagun has always got a, friendly smile meeting people. But one of my comments is, if you make 3 good conversations and relationships, if you have 3 good conversations and you leave an event with 3 names of people that you might follow up and send an email or do a LinkedIn connection, if you have 3 good conversations, call it a good night. It's not a matter of collecting 20 business cards, just to have them in your hand and say, oh, I got 20 cards. But if you had 3 really good conversations, then that's a success.
It is. No, I agree. It's a skills. I call it a skill because you and the only way to build the skills is the more practice you put in more and more, and you cannot build the skills when you're by yourself. You have to get out and be uncomfortable the first day, second day, and I think that day, like you said, you will be able to be making some progress.
And lots of people are uncomfortable. You know, if you see someone else who's standing by themselves and you say, oh gosh, this is hard, you know, it's hard to walk in this room, and they'll say, yeah, you're right, it is. You know, who are you? You know, you just have to like be a little vulnerable, and other people will be there for you.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back to a little bit to the conversation because I think we're talking about welcome to USA. You are hired. How did you come up with that title?
Yeah, it's interesting. Coming up with the title of a book is an interesting thing. I had several titles that I was considering, and I had two that I narrowed it down to, and I had about 12 foreign-born people vote. So the first one that I had it was visa, job, success. Kind of 3 words: visa, job, success. Because I wanted to send a message that, visa, it's international. And so that was shorter, and I liked visa, job, success. But the other idea, which was welcome, you're hired. Actually, the first one was welcome, you're hired. And then several of the international people said, you should say welcome to the USA, you're hired, just to be very clear that this is who the book is for. So that's what it became. Welcome to the USA, you're hired. And I did the same thing when I had 2 book covers. One had kind of an American flag look, and then this one had the map with all the kind of fun letters and words about the states, and had kind of the red, white, and blue, but the map kind of showing that this is a national, and then also the islands and the other places where immigration works. So it was somewhat of a group process to help me come up with something that I thought would be catchy. I also liked the idea of welcome to the USA, you're hired, has a certain enthusiasm to it, a certain positive message. I feel upbeat when I see that you're hired with the exclamation point. And when I was working with an editor, we had it without the exclamation point. We had it with the exclamation point. Welcome to the USA, you're hired, or welcome to the USA, you're hired. And so I decided I liked the exclamation point because I want people to feel that it's positive and that this is a good time. But when you write a book, which again, I've never done, the whole idea of what do you call it, and the colors and the tone of the book and the way it looks on the shelf. I particularly liked books where the background is light and the words pop versus books that are dark. And I wanted it to be very clear. So I hope that you feel that it's welcoming. I hope you think that it's friendly. I hope you think that it's an inviting book when you see it.
It is. I mean, I would say for those who have not bought the book, I was just reading it last night, and it's right here. So it sends a very positive note when you read it. And even like you said, welcome to America. Everybody, when you come into America, you want to hear that you're fired. You're hired, as opposed to what they are told, you're fired.
No, we don't want that.
We want to hear that the first thing you get in there, you are hired, and you're making your dollar. Because everybody wants they're here, they want to just start making dollars and do all the kind of business investments. So you really, I think for me, the title is really catchy, and I like it, and I like the wording down there: a guide for foreign-born people seeking jobs.
Yeah, right. So it's very clear. It's a guide for foreign-born people seeking jobs.
That is true. So the other part maybe I wanted to ask you related to that part is that when you're writing this book, obvious, there is what you had in mind, and there is what you wanted to put it together, and now we have the book that is done, that is already done. What have you learned as when in the process of writing the book, and to the time that you got this is the final product? Are there some lessons that you maybe had learned along the way from what you had at the beginning?
I learned to be more organized in the flow of the book.
Mhm.
I learned to read it, making sure that the language was clear and I didn't use words that foreign-born people might not know. And so that was important because I didn't want to use slang or things that wouldn't be understood.
Mhm.
And I tried to make my sentences shorter than I normally would. And then thinking about the layout, that was something different. I tend to be very information oriented, just Jeffrey, I'll tell you this, I'll tell you this, I'll tell you this. And the idea of trying to make it flow and be have space and have some pages for people to take notes on the section, and there's some summaries of each section, and there are things that lead you from one stage of the job search to the next. Those are things about the flow that made it different than what I thought, but it made it better for you as the reader.
Yeah.
You can read it. I will say it is available in a soft cover, and it's also on an ebook available from Amazon and Barnes and Noble for people that want to buy it one by one. But if anyone wants to order them in larger quantities for an organization, they can order them directly from me in a bigger quantity for a discount. But I'm not doing sales of one by one on my website and mailing individual books from my home to individuals. It's just, I'm letting Amazon and Barnes and Noble do that. So
And
I have had questions about, like, in the future, maybe there would be a workbook for it. Or maybe it would be in a different language. But really, for the first year, I want to just get the message out across the country, to other African chambers, to other groups, the Kenyan group, the Ghanaian people, anybody around the country where you have connections, all the Nigerians. I would love them all to say, St. Louis is doing something well. There's no book like this. And so it's useful anywhere in the country. It might even be useful in someone's home country for people thinking they're coming. But it's going to also have a halo effect of saying that St. Louis does something well, and that St. Louis, all the organizations, there are many that are profiled. Actually, two of the experts from the International Institute of St. Louis, Anita Barker, contributed about resumes. Chelsea Hand Sheridan contributed to the section that I wrote on refugees. So different people contributed on international students and on networking. So it's a national book, but there's a halo to St. Louis. And so if you share it with your networks outside, I would be most appreciative, because they will all benefit. But we also know it'll make St. Louis look good, and we want us all to look good.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, I'm looking at the people who have participated, and you have captured very well at the end. I was asking myself, how did you even get all these names? How did you connect with all this? Then I just remember, like, I see Giselle mentioned that you're a connector. So it was easy for you to connect with this. And I think that my largest network that I've made is actually made through you.
I think also it taught me that, like, I asked 12 people if they would each write something to add into different chapters. I didn't know if 12 or 6 would agree, and 12 out of 12 agreed, and they all gave me their information on time. And I also had to ask people to do testimonials, to talk about the book when they hadn't really read it, but they'd seen part of it. And everybody I asked said, definitely, I want to be part of it. So, that was really news to me. I mean, I wasn't sure. I was, a little bit vulnerable about whether they would agree or whether they would actually do it. And they understood why I wanted to put this information out, and they wanted to be part of it. And so, that was very validating to me. And they want to now tell others about the book because they believe that it's going to help our economy, and it's going to help an individual find a better job faster.
No, that's good. I read through those comments from the front page, which is very nice, actually. And you can tell because it's a very diverse group of people from different background, different profession, different community. And that tells you how much connected you are in St. Louis. Like you mentioned, the book, I will say that it's very catchy because it starts from when you come to America, where it started the stage one, understanding the job search, and it walks you through pre-job interview. It goes all the way to interview process, accepting job offer, advancing when you get a job? How do you advance your job level to maybe advance your rank, and also maybe at the end you also mentioned about the special acknowledgement. So I like the way you put it, from the very beginning all the way to now when you're actually wanting to rise up your rank, which means that if somebody is an employer, there is a great resource, because they can be able to understand maybe some of the challenges that the foreign-born population go through. But also as an immigrant, you've walked the journey. You're able to walk with them the journey. From here, you go to the next step, and you have provided very nice examples, which I think I would recommend people to be able to see. People can be able to connect with that. I think the next part of the question, and I would say maybe as you speak, if you have a question, we have a session for the Q&A towards the end. You can post your question on the chat. We'll be able to read them to Betsy. But I think the other question that I wanted to ask you is that I've seen you work very well with different groups and different community, but also changing a lot of the narrative here in St. Louis through Mosaic Project. Maybe you might be able to share a little bit about what has things that you've seen change since the Mosaic Projects came in and where we are right now. Have you made any impact that you'll be able to see where we were 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and where we are right now in terms of?
Yes, Jeffrey. I think that, we had data about the growth of our foreign-born community up until the past administration that had put a halt on, so much immigration and consulates and the pandemic. But we definitely were growing in our foreign-born numbers, and that was very rewarding to see the actual numbers for the region. And I also think that one of the important aspects about becoming a welcoming region, and we are part of Welcoming America, Vitendo for Africa is part of Welcoming America. How do you make the community more welcoming? And part of that is through storytelling and, talking about people and their stories. And so, for example, I've nominated Jeffrey and Vitendo for a number of awards because I think that Vitendo for Africa and Jeffrey have a really good story. And when people hear his story and hear about Vitendo for Africa, they get drawn into it. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just saying, oh, we have an African chamber or there's an organization called Vitendo, but there's a storytelling. Mm-hmm. So part of what Mosaic does is we have a goal of 100 media stories a year, positive, that mention Mosaic in St. Louis. And we track it. They're all listed at the St. Louis Mosaic Project website. And so we are always looking for the stories to tell and the good stories. We know there are bad stories. We know there are difficult stories. We know there are problems. There are problems among groups. There are problems within groups. Our region has problems. Every region has problems. And there are plenty of people who can talk about the problems. But our goal is to find those storytelling that are uplifting and that make other people look at the region and people differently and say, I want to meet a Jeffrey. I want to meet a Zelipa. I want to meet Shagun. So that's part of what we do. And I think encouraging everyone to tell their stories, that's something Zelipa and I have talked about as I've mentored Zelipa. And, she has opened up on many ways now of telling different stories of her life and how it relates to her professional world and her personal world, because those stories pull people in and they form relationships. And so I think there's a lot of power in that. And I've seen St. Louis now responding, and that's something that Mosaic has been a part of. My background in corporate America was in marketing, and that's one reason I was hired to lead the Mosaic Project, was to use those storytelling abilities to make our region appealing.
Great. I like what you mentioned, us telling our own stories, because if we don't tell our own stories, there are people who will be able to tell our stories, and I can guarantee you it's not going to be a positive story.
No, and you have so many good things. I mean, there's education, motivation, background, learnings, training, resilience, so many things that are all valued, but you need to tell that story.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And I hope my people are listening here to see that we need to tell our own stories, and not necessarily in this platform, but also wherever you are, wherever you work with, the people you interact with, let them know about your story and help them to address some of the misconceptions they may have about you as a foreign born or you as an immigrant. And I'm so grateful to see Giselle, who is also in the audience, because you connected us with Giselle, and we teamed up together to help address some of the misconception people have about immigrants, and then maybe helping immigrants understand or maybe address some of the misconceptions they have about the African Americans. So we've been having those conversations, and I can check from the feedback. I see there are so many things that has happened, and people are learning through those small conversations.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, telling the story is a big thing in a good way. Nobody can tell your story better than you. That's a very good point. I think I'm looking at the time here and see if I can throw one more question here. That is 6:44. Yeah, we have. I'm gonna ask this final question, then I will ask the audience to be open to the audience. I think the last part would be. What advice would you give to the employers who maybe are still not sure about the way to embrace the foreign population? What advice would you give them to see that how they can be able to create a very welcoming environment at your workplace?
I think that the organizations to look for are those that are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. Looking at those that are naming people to head up parts of their organization. The other thing to look for is organizations that have employee resource groups or business resource groups called ERGs, BRG. Many of them have an employee resource group for multicultural or other organizations that you can be part of. And if you see that they do that, then there are people that will be in that you can connect with. And I think for employers that I talk to, for them to understand that this sends an important message, the people that you have in leadership, the people on your board, that one of the comments is that if you can see it, you can be it. Mm-hmm. So if you don't see people that look like you, as a woman, if I didn't see anybody as a woman, or if someone is a person who is Hispanic, African, of color, whatever, if you don't see people, you're less likely to think you can be it. And so companies that want to advance in having better talent, more diverse talent, they do understand that. And so they're looking. So, they're looking for you.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I think because of the time, we'll for the people. If you have questions, you can unmute yourself. We're going to have a few minutes for Q&A, or if you have a point you want to raise up, this is the time. I think if you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself.
No questions. You all know about how to negotiate your job offers and what to ask for.
Yeah, I think maybe as we get people to warm it up, the part that I will. Sorry.
So Victoria had a question about getting people connected to the program. So I think there's a couple of thoughts. One is that the St. Louis Mosaic Project, we have several programs and we have ways that people can engage with some of the ways that we connect other people. We are not an agency, but we are a team of 3. And we have programs with mentoring where people get one-time connections. We have a women's program where international women meet together. We have one where international women and local women get matched together. We help immigrant entrepreneurs. So connect with me directly on that. The other thing I would say is in terms of the job hiring process, I would say, if you get the book, talk about the book. If you want me to do a separate discussion with your clients, like on a Zoom with some topics from the book, I'm happy to do that. And if you have a way that you'd like to get the book and figure out the right messages or the topics that your clients want, we could break it up into certain parts and talk about that. So I'd be open. Again, I'm learning as I do this about the best way to be of service and how how the book can be of service and I can be of service, or the Mosaic Project, together or separately.
Yeah,
Do you have
thank you
another
so
thought
much.
on that, Victoria?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll definitely be reaching out to you. This is all very new to me. My supervisor, Georgie from Castle, emailed me right before I was off. I just started at Castle. I was currently at Family Care Health Centers as their community health worker with the bilingual community, with the Latino community, because I'm Mexican American and, have a heart for this work. So now I'm their new immigrant inclusion specialist at Castle. And when she sent me this information, I was like, oh, I've never heard of like this book or this program. So I will definitely be reaching out to you to get more information, just to see how to connect my patients and those clients to your organization, or to just more of these services, because there is such a big need. And unfortunately, there is so much language barrier. There is so many like other barriers too, when it comes to like documentation and, not even having like social securities and things like that. Like I'm finding that housing and rental assistance and even like energy assistance is such a big barrier too, because unfortunately without those documentations, you're not eligible. So it's like there's all these resources that we have, but unfortunately a lot of immigrants and refugees aren't eligible. So it's like, oh, we have this, but sorry, you can't take this. So I would really love to connect with you.
I would say, again, the International Institute, which has a large staff and many different services and resources, most all of their programs are open to people regardless of their documentation. Some of them they're required for federal reasons. They need to have, but most are not. So there are a lot of resources available.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great, Victoria. I definitely appreciate your comments, and I think I will also reach out to you to see how we can be able to work together. I know Castle has been a great resource even to our community. I've referred a couple of people there, and your team has been grateful to them. We appreciate your support too.
Awesome. That's great to hear. It's barely my second day there. I just started yesterday at Castle. So I'm hearing so many great things about the organization already. So I'm really excited to connect with you guys and just network with this, and just to continue doing this work in the community.
Absolutely. No, I got your email. I think you registered, so I got your email. I may be able to follow up with you.
Okay. Awesome.
Great. I see somebody just mentioned there that based on Betsy's acceptance and positive results in the community, she is very well respected. Therefore, when she refers an organization for an award, it will cause the hearer to pay attention. And that's powerful. That one, I agree. I can't even add anything.
But I think, you all underestimate your own ability to recognize and nominate people, and there's a lot of power in that. So I also see that Zelipa and Arnola are here, and they've been part of discussions with me and things on this process. I don't know if they have thoughts, or Giselle particularly, to add about how important some of the different skills are that we've talked about.
Absolutely, that would be a good idea. Giselle or Zelipa, if you're in a position to speak, please.
I know.
Giselle, you're on mute.
I got it.
Okay.
I'm on it now. Hello. I would just say that the job search process has just become a lot more complex, these days in comparison to prior days. There was a time when you could go walk in a building and leave a resume with the receptionist, right? Now I'm dating myself. But with the use of the internet, that facilitates a lot of the job search, or does some of the what I would call ferreting out early on, it just requires a whole different skill set. And it does require the skill that Betsy has, in terms of connecting. I can't tell you how impactful it is, the work that Betsy does in terms of when people are looking for jobs, trying to connect them with someone within the company. And I think that it speaks volumes. And when you can have someone usher you in that can give a recommendation, it helps, because today also, because the jobs are on the internet, there's so much competition, for certain jobs, like you could get hundreds of resumes for a job, and you have to help yourself to stand out. So I can really appreciate how Betsy has put this book together to really help, those from outside the country get their footing, because it probably is very different too, in terms of how job search is from the other countries where individuals are coming from. You know, so I think it's a lot to learn. And before the book, I think you're just kind of learning on the fly, you know, which will probably elongate the time that it takes you to find an opportunity. So I think that Betsy's book can also be an opportunity for people to reduce the amount of time that it takes them to look, to seek, to find, to secure a role, you know, which when you're looking for an opportunity, that's what you want. You know, you want to be out there as, you know, for a very short, as short a period of time as possible. So thank you, Betsy.
In the book, I do. Yeah, I know. But I talk about the applicant tracking systems, that the computers and the artificial intelligence and some of those systems, if you have a gap in your resume, it won't send your resume forward. And how many foreign-born people have a gap? Everybody. And so there's understanding that, and there are ways you can write your resume so you don't show a gap. And these are things that I talk about in the book because using all these computer tracking, sometimes can make it harder if you don't have an advocate or somebody helping you.
I agree. I agree. I think there is something that I know you mentioned about the resume. When I came from Kenya, and most of them were coming from Africa, we call it CV. And some of us, we just come in the way we wrote it when we were looking the same CV we were using to apply jobs in Kenya, in Ghana, in Tanzania. It's the same. We come and make copies and send the same copy looking for jobs here. And I can guarantee you, out of experience, nobody will, I mean, nobody will have many people don't understand. They will not actually, when they read it, it may not make sense to them. So having a way that we can be able to write it and have somebody look at it and write it in a way that
yeah, so I talk about that in the book, the difference between the CV and the resume. And so, you know, that's an important thing to understand. And issues about putting your visa status on the resume, things that we've learned, such as don't put your address on the resume. You know, the things that people, you know, again, if you didn't work in the field like I do, you wouldn't know. I talk about unconscious bias against certain names, against using addresses, things that, you know, you in a perfect world wouldn't be a bias, but it's not a perfect world. So if you want to give yourself the best chance, the tips in the book, you know, sometimes you might not like what I say, but it might, you know, and you can decide to either accept it or not, but, you know, it will help get a better job faster.
So, Jeffrey, this is Alipa.
Good. Go ahead.
I'm very faint because I'm talking over microphone because I'm boarding a plane now to Paris, going home. But I cannot say enough about Betsy. I met Betsy in a very unique way because every event that I thought meant something to me, I would attend, and I would find Betsy as a speaker. Then I go to another event that has meant something to me, and I would find Betsy as a speaker. Now I kept wondering, how do I penetrate this environment that really I'm so passionate about, but I can't figure it out. And so I emailed Betsy and I said, Betsy, I see you everywhere I go, and I need a mentor because it's what I'm passionate about. And I can tell you, almost close to 2 years later, my world has been very different. Betsy is a name that is recognized in St. Louis, has opened lots of opportunities for me. In fact, one opportunity she doesn't even know, just by speaking my story. Recently, I was appointed to be an observer in a UN food system conference, just to listen and an observer. And this is just because she's really encouraged me to talk about my stories and they're real, not like just stories.
Well, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
And so then the other thing that is just another bold step I did is, you notice on LinkedIn, this is the first article in my life I posted on LinkedIn, is posting the book that her book with a friend that I gifted the book to, and we just posted it. And it was just like that, like immediately after that, I don't know how many people I had. I mean, I would say, maybe a little over 30 people. inviting me to connect with them, And it's just that boldness that she brings out of immigrants, including me. I mean, I thought I was strong until I met Betsy, and she just pulled this other person out of me. So I wanted to commend that, and thanks for the opportunity. And the book is great.
Thank you. Well, your story is part of it, and that's something that means a lot to me. And that's why this has really been a project of, pleasure and passion and purpose, all those things that have made it very meaningful to me to be able to bring that together. Anything final, Jeffrey? Then we can sign off.
That is true. I think we right on time. I don't know if there was somebody who had something to say. I think we wrap it up. But I would say, I like what Zalipa just shared her story, because I've worked her through journey working with you, and all the people that I've sharing their testimony because of from the books, but also from the audience, how you have really impacted many homes and many lives here in St. Louis. I'm sure even just through the book, you will continue doing that. And there is always a quote that I always like sharing with my kids. And I say, we don't feel good because we do good things. We feel good. We don't do good things because we feel good. We feel good because we do good things. And that is exactly what it is. When you hear this, I mean, you want to hear people talking about how life has changed because of that little introduction, that little connections that you made. What I would say maybe, and I'm sure I'm going to ask you to give a final thoughts to the audience, is that my challenge to every immigrant is that be willing to be uncomfortable, to go and meet people that are not familiar with, the people you don't know, because it's only those through connection, those through people that you don't know are the one that will be able to make you connect to the places that probably maybe the dream job that you want, the dream business that you want to achieve. But until you get out, you get out and feel uncomfortable and be able to make those connections, then you will be still tied in that small connections, a small zone that you are. But I think you've and we've talked about that. For me, you've shared a lot with us, and for me, I've really took that challenge, and I feel comfortable sometimes. It, like you said at the beginning, it's very uncomfortable, but as you get used to it, you find that you're meeting people that you met last time. So you build a network of friends because you're meeting different platforms. And I think I will ask you, maybe you can give us final thoughts, and also maybe give us if there's a link where people can buy the book. If there's anything coming up.
Yeah, Amazon and Barnes and Noble online is where you can buy it. And I guess my final thought is that, our American people and our American economy need what you bring. And so, we're all better because you're here, and your success is our success, and it's all for one success. Mm-hmm. And that's true for the country. It's especially true for St. Louis. So, I want you to succeed, and I'm here to help you do that. And I think when you read the book, you'll hear Betsy's voice speaking to you with very specific things. It's like, oh yeah, I can hear Betsy saying that. It's not theoretical. I wrote it in a way that's very much personal, and I want you to be successful. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Betsy. I appreciate your time. And thank you for the great insight that you've shared with us. I would say that for those who have not been able to buy the book, I think I had shared on the link, but I still have it on our website. But also I can post the link. That's there. It's already there. Betty has also posted on the chat. Please go get a copy, read it, and please, with the information that you've learned and what you learned when you read the book, please share with us. With other people that you come across within your network. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the upcoming events. For that is, as you can see on the screen, that was for our today. Then our next session we'll have, it's on October 10th. This with Priscilla Wachira. It's going to be a Zoom. You can just click that Zoom link there and be able to register. It's going to be a Sunday at 4, and Priscilla is an advocate for mental health. She will be able to touch a little bit on some of the challenges also that we face as immigrants, especially youth and parenting. And then on Thursday, the October 21st, we normally have Building Momentum speaker series. Like I mentioned, we started this series at Mosaic Projects, I think almost 4 years ago. We normally do 4 speaker series in a year. So the final for this year will be on October 21st. And we are lucky to have a great speaker who is Dr. Mati. I don't want to say the last name because I want to butcher her last name. But she's been appointed to be the director of St. Louis Department of Health. And for those who've been following up on CNN and other media, she's been a great advocate on vaccine, not just here in St. Louis, but also across the globe. Then we have Anne. She'll be able to share a little bit about the experience that they just did with the Kenya construction of a school in Kenya. They started a school in Kenya. These are high school students here in St. Louis. And then Meet the Author will be on November 11th. We have Betsy Cohen, who is the president of International Institute, will also be our guest. But also reminding you that we have our annual gala on November 13. We'll be sharing more information on the website, but also on the email. I hope that you will be able to, we're going to provide a link there. You can be able to click and register for the gala, which is a great way to share a little bit about what we've done here in St. Louis. But also sharing on our goal. We're working on a strategic plan, and we want to see how you can be able to be part of this story and be part of what we're doing in St. Louis. Other than that, I would say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate so much for your presentation and great talk, and even everything that you've done for us as a group of immigrants. We appreciate you. And with that, I would just say thank you so much, everyone, for those who are able to log in, and have a nice evening.
We support all kind of businesses, and you don't have to have an account with Midwest Bank Center to get
Stories you've heard before about African Americans in terms of gender. Bring your mind wide open that way, because from here we would like you to make a change to the environment.
Understanding and healthy dialogue.
He is married. He's married to his honey.
A non-profit organization serving first the small community.
To raise money for Kenya, we want to build some classrooms there. Technology is one of those spaces that thrives on problem solving. There's so many
address some of the economic disparities between the African community and the broader St. Louis community.
For Africa is here for you. They want to help you do this.
And so we have that. Immigrants on the resources available for entrepreneurs and business owners.
I was the one who came here during winter. I almost cried in this house with the little one. But when I called, I remember when I called someone on average per year from 75 countries.
There's something a company wants this bot to be able to do.
As American, I said, what is your last name? That is a reminder all the time. He is not so American as he thinks. The last name. So
I can definitely assist with
those resources, and we want to find a way how we can be able to connect those two. Those who are looking for information and those who have that information, we want to bring them together.
And the persistence and the drive that I've seen.
And I grew up in the late 40s, early 50s. And at that time, the polite Americans and other persons of African ancestry.
Should we talk about economics? I mean, I love this idea of why aren't we as American
you all take something from this meeting and go and do something about it.